Thanks for stopping by. In this video, we're going to be cutting open a tank type water heater to observe the corrosion that is inside of it. And we're just going to take the entire top off like we're opening a giant can of limescale, probably, and see what we can observe inside. This particular unit looks like it developed a leak on the lower element because you can see a rust stain coming down right here. And that's going to be your most common failure, is just the water heater springs a leak and you get a little puddle of water on the floor and you know that your tank has failed. All right, let's get this thing cut open. Also, check out that sunset. Now that we've made a cut all the way around the outer skin of the water heater, I'm going to see if I can just basically pry that off of there so we can get to the actual tank. There's the tank. Man, they've really increased the thickness of the top of the foam on these things. We're almost too high. We'll have to cut this down a little bit lower. You guys think it's time for a new blade? It's getting down there. Some of you probably already know this, but in order to prolong the life of your grinding wheel, you want to just barely grind with the edge and don't plunge through the material. If you plunge through the material, you're going to wear out the actual blade a lot quicker. So run it right as close to the edge as possible. It'll take longer to cut, but your blade will last probably twice as long. I'll link to a video in the description by Fireball Tool, who did a really cool analysis of cutting wheels and how they work. Over here on this side of the water heater, it's already wet underneath. On the other side, the foam is much more adhered to the actual water heater. So it could be that the point of failure was up towards the top a little bit more. All right, you guys ready to see this? Let's flip the lid over and look at the underside of the lid to start off with. All right, so the first thing I'm noticing here is, look at this. This is what's left of that anode rod. In all likelihood, the water ate the anode rod was never replaced, and the tank went bad. So anode rod replacement can be extremely important. Over here you can see we've got a lot of corrosion on this edge and a little bit up here, but then the rest of this inside of the tank actually looks pretty nice and clean. Now right here, this is our cold water line that goes to the bottom of the tank. When new cold water goes into the tank, it goes to the bottom of the tank and not to the top. That way it just draws the hot water right off the top of the tank so you get the warmest water possible. So taking a look down in this tank here, you can see that most of it looks pretty good, with a few exceptions. You can see right here at this relief valve, there's quite a bit of corrosion right there. And there's also quite a bit of corrosion right down here. Further down in the bottom here, you can see we've got pretty much the same story. Most of the tank looks good, but a lot of corrosion right there around the element. If you have an older water heater, the limescale on the bottom, if it hadn't been properly flushed out, would be very significant. Let's take a look at what this one's got. Oh, it looks like it's only got about an inch of limescale, maybe. Something like that. Interesting. And it looks like if these water heaters around here were maintained a little bit better, you might get a little bit longer out of each particular unit. We're at the location where all of the scrap water heaters are dropped off for our plumbing company, and I did not cherry pick these whatsoever. The date of manufacture or the installation date is written on or in the serial number of each one of these water heaters. With the exception of this one, I can't figure out the date on this, but check out the years that these things were made. This one is 2019 installation date, 2020 manufacture date, 2016, 2019, and then way back there we have a 2004. So even including that one way in the back, that's a 2004, the average lifespan of these tank type water heaters is this. So just kind of interesting to observe what actually happens with tank type water heaters in the real world. Are you ready to see inside?
Yeah. Is it pretty full of stuff?
This one is 2019, so.
It looks pretty nice from here.
Uh-huh.
There is quite a bit of sludge in the bottom.
Yeah, for 2019. What's interesting is that the age of these things is crazy new. This is 2020, 2019, 2016, 2019, and the only one that's like decently old is that one back there, is a 2004. But otherwise, they do not last very long at all.
We had a water heater. They would get a little bit of hot water and then it would be cold, even though it was a full tank of hot water.
Weird.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure my theory is that broke off. So of course you have water that's leaving right here, and you have water that's coming in immediately right there.
Yes.
And it just goes straight across.
So even though the whole tank was full of hot water, they just couldn't access it.
Yep.
But yeah, check out that anode rod. That must be a stainless steel core on those things, huh?
Yeah, they are.
If you need some stainless steel wire in a pinch, you just pull your anode rod out, and hopefully it looks like this, and then you can just use it.
My water heater in my basement is like a 1990 something.
Yeah, it seems like well water, generally speaking, doesn't destroy them nearly as fast as municipal water. So we've got our drop cord ready to go, and our receptacle. Now we're not going to touch the water heater while this is happening because we don't have a ground hooked up. But right here you can see we've taken our extension cord and hooked it directly to the element. And that's just going to allow us to power the element by itself. Now, normally these things draw like 4,000 watts, but since it's half the voltage, it should only draw about 2,000 watts.
I can hear some bad sounds.
Okay, it's hit 120 degrees now.
Oh, it's like a nice little heater. Oh.
Oh yeah. So it actually takes quite a long time before they like start to droop over or whatever. Oh, look at that, it drooped right over. Oh my word. Wow, they're surprisingly tough. Well, you can like see the heat waves around it. It's really cool. So to answer the question, how long do tank type water heaters last? Well, the probably truthful answer is this average that we just calculated earlier. However, you can prolong the lifespan of your tank type water heaters by simply putting in new anode rods once in a while. Now, depending on the type of water you have, it might be more frequent or less frequent. The only way to tell really is to put a new water heater in and then pull the anode rod 6 months to a year later and see what it looks like. If it's still got a ways to go, you might be able to wait a little bit longer in between. But we've got some places where we have to go back and replace the anode rods every 6 months. We have a commercial customer who is having their big tank water heaters go bad every 2 years, and they're very expensive. So we recommended that we put them on a maintenance schedule and come back and replace the anode rods on a regular basis. And ever since we started doing that, it has completely eliminated the need for them to replace the entire unit, because that anode rod protects the tank from corrosion. So anode rods is a big thing, and then the second thing is flushing the tank once a year, just taking a garden hose, connecting it to the bottom valve, and just flushing out the lime scale that's in the bottom can make a big difference as well. But honestly, the main thing is probably anode rods. If you've had a tank type water heater fail, probably the anode rod went bad first and then the tank failed. So definitely work towards keeping those anode rods fresh. Another possible solution for you if you're considering replacing your water heater after it went bad in only a few years is to look at your tankless water heater options. I actually did a video talking about the 8 myths regarding tankless water heaters with Renai, and so I will link to that video right here or up at the top, and you guys can just learn a little bit more about tankless water heaters and see if that might be a good option. They have several benefits, like never running out of hot water. They are made of corrosion resistant material, which can potentially last longer than a tank type water heater. And the other thing that I like about tankless water heaters is that you can power them off of a generator a lot easier than the tank type electric water heater, because you're only needing to provide power for the pumps and motors, not for the actual heating of the water that's going to be coming from natural gas or propane.